Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. US President Donald Trump has paused tariffs on dozens of countries, instead imposing a blanket 10% import levy on major trading partners. However, Trump has increased tariffs on China to 125%, warning the country not to retaliate. Following Trump's 90-day pause on most trading partners, global markets have rebounded. Worldwide stocks have jumped as the US says dozens of nations are in contact over a trade deal. Meanwhile, President Trump says that military action in Iran is absolutely possible if the countries can't agree on a nuclear deal. The US had earlier imposed further sanctions on Iran despite potential talks between the nations. German Conservative leader Friedrich Merz has announced a coalition to form the next government, stating that Germany is back. A deal with the SPD has been agreed with an aim to revive growth and tackle migration. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Russia has dragged China into their war with Kyiv, saying that there are more than 150 Chinese nationals fighting for Russia. China have earlier called claims from Zelensky absolutely groundless. The death toll from a tragic roof collapse in the Dominican Republic's capital of Santo Domingo has risen to 184. At least 300 people were inside the Jet Set Club watching a performance by Ruby Perez, whose body was recovered on Wednesday. South Korean opposition leader Lee Jae-myung has entered the presidential race. Lee, who is the frontrunner in many opinion polls, has promised to fix inequality and spur economic growth. A 24-hour general strike in Argentina has started as the country's biggest trade union's members protest against President Javier Milei's austerity measures. It comes as the country waits on a pending IMF $20 billion bailout. After massive market turmoil, President Trump has paused tariffs for countries, but not for China. The US-China trade war is heating up. ASEAN economic ministers released a statement saying no retaliatory measures against the United States. Taiwan Foreign Minister wants coalition with the US on trade. Let's listen in to what foreign ministers had to say.
现在多了90天时间，我们可以更详细深入的来谈台美的经贸合作。那我们希望这不只是一个被动的回应的川普的对等关税，我们希望能够开启台美在经贸关系上，特别是赖总统提到的台湾投资美国队。那我们希望能够借由美国的庞大的市场，他们有很好的科技、资金跟人才。 那结合成台美联队，这样一个。
Meanwhile, Canadian opposition leader Pierre Poilievre slammed Trump's move as disrespectful after the president announced a pause on tariffs while keeping duties on Canada. Trump's 90-day freeze does not extend to Canada and Mexico, as their goods remain subject to a 25% fentanyl-related tariff unless they fully comply with the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement rules. Let's listen in to what the Canadian opposition leader had to say.
I have to address today's latest disrespect by President Trump of our country. While President Trump announced a 90-day pause on tariffs for dozens of countries, he kept those tariffs in place on Canada. Take that in for a moment. Almost every country in the world got a pause on American tariffs, but not us, America's best friend.
Well, in South Korea, acting President Han Duck-soo said that his government will push for negotiations with the United States over tariffs, hoping to ease the economic strain. That's according to the Yonhap news agency. Additionally, according to Hanoi officials, Vietnam and the United States agreed to start negotiations on a reciprocal trade agreement. Yesterday, in a post on Truth Social, Trump wrote, "China has shown a lack of respect for the world's markets. Because of that, I am raising tariffs to 125% effective immediately." At the same time, he confirmed the 90-day pause on tariffs for other nations. Let's hear what Trump had to say.
China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't, you know, I think in financial markets, because they changed. Look how much it changed today. We went from, you know, pretty moderate today, but over the last few days, it looked pretty glum, to, I guess they say it was the biggest day in financial history. That's a pretty big change. And I think the word would be flexible. You have to be flexible, like he's asking.
Meanwhile, Australia has rejected China's proposal to team up against the United States. Instead, it is looking to diversify trade and cut reliance on China. Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles said, "We are not going to be holding hands with China in any global contest." Trump says he is open to a deal, but the big questions remain. How will China and other countries react, and what's next for Canada and Mexico? Well, Donald Trump's decision to delay severe tariffs on US trading partners or sharply increasing duties on China has intensified trade war tensions but fueled a wave of market optimism. Taiwan stocks closed up a record 9.3%. In Asia, the stock exchange of Thailand opened strong and continued to climb as investors welcomed the tariff suspension. The Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong surged at the open and maintained upward momentum throughout the session. Despite the sharp tariff hike on Chinese goods, Shanghai markets opened higher and showed resilience. Tokyo's Nikkei surged more than 8%, while Seoul and Singapore each piled on more than 5%. Sydney and Jakarta gained more than 4%, with tech firms being the standout performers. Sony, Sharp, Panasonic and SoftBank chalked up double-digit gains, while airlines, car makers and casinos also enjoyed strong buying. Yesterday on Wall Street, the Nasdaq saw a dramatic surge, while the S&P 500 rebounded sharply, marking one of its strongest performances in years. Tech stocks led the rally, pushing all sectors higher and driving widespread market optimism. Well, joining us in the newsroom is Rema Hans, our associate producer at NewsX World, to provide us some more insight on these markets. Rema, what can you show us?
Thank you so much, Joshua. So I would like to start with Hong Kong first. Of course, as you rightly mentioned, while for Asia there is, of course, there's good news that what we are seeing right here. So Hang Seng has gone up by about 2.99%, which is about 605.46 points. The session is right now at 20,869.95. Of course, after United States announcement of the hefty tariffs, it was a bloodbath for the markets in the past couple of days for Asia, but now we can see that there's some amount of recovery here. Moving on to Nikkei, it's somewhat going down now. It's about there's a very slight difference. It's 0.60%, and it's gone down by 210.00 points. The session right now is at 34,650. So there is a decline here in Tokyo. Moving on to Kospi. So in Korea, the markets are looking slightly better. The points have gone up by 139.27, which is about 6.07%. The session right now stands at 2,432.97. And of course, this is a sharp, there's a significant difference from what we were seeing yesterday after a complete meltdown in the market in the past couple of days that globally that we have experienced. Moving on to Shanghai, Right now, of course, the market has closed down, and of course, ultimately we will be able to see some amount of recovery in the couple of hours, perhaps. Moving on to United States, there is also NASDAQ has gone up significantly. It's about 12.16%. NASDAQ, just to tell you, of course, it contains all your, it's a collection of all your tech giants. So there is a significant rise here, which is about 1,857.06, by which it's gone up, and the session right now is at 17,124.97. Good news for Dow Jones as well. It's right now at 40,608.45. There is a sharp increase here. It's about 7.87%, which is about 2,962.86 points for Dow Jones as well, after yesterday's announcement for about 100%, 104% tariffs rather for China. The US market was also somewhat seeing a decline, but right now there is a sign of recovery here. Moving on to S&P 500, the session is right now at 5,456.90, and there is of course 9.52% of increase that it's seen, which is about 474.13 points. However, if we talk about Indian market, Nifty 50 has gone down by 0.61%, which is 136.70 points. The session has closed at 22,399.15, and we will of course see some amount of recovery in the upcoming hours. Moving on to BSE Sensex, it's at 73,847.15, which is about 0.51% of a decline, and 379.93 of a sharp decline here as well. Joshua, of course, 125% of tariffs on China is somewhat going to affect the markets globally too, but for Asia, rest of Asia, there is some amount of relief. For United States also, there is some amount of recovery that we are seeing. However, this flip-flopping of tariffs still remains uncertain for markets. We'll see in the upcoming hours or the following days what it stands for the market. Back to you in the studio, Joshua.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Rema, for that insight. The majority of the market showing the same trend, and that is a very clear rebound. We will, of course, be across all of the developments following the fallout of Trump's tariffs, the pause, and the ongoing dispute with China. But we do now move on, and the Dominican Republic rescue workers have now ended their search for survivors of the nightclub roof collapse, as the death toll has passed 180 in the Caribbean nation's worst disaster in decades. An official statement had earlier said that all reasonable possibilities of finding more survivors had been exhausted, and the focus of the operation will turn to recovering bodies. Over 300 rescue workers, aided by sniffer dogs, had spent 2 days combing through mounds of fallen bricks, steel bars and tin sheets, supported by firefighters from Puerto Rico and Israel. Aerial images of the site showed a scene resembling the aftermath of an earthquake, with a gaping hole where the roof of the club, a fixture of Santo Domingo's nightlife for half a century, had been. Over 500 people were also injured when the roof caved in, while renowned merengue singer Ruby Perez was performing for a crowd of hundreds. Authorities have said it's too early to determine the cause of the disaster. Well, here is how some family members are reacting to the tragedy.
Eso ha sido un proceso bien duro, porque ayer nos pasamos el día de clínica en clínica, de hospital en hospital. Y en el frente del NEWSX también, buscando a nuestro hermano con la esperanza de encontrarlo con vida. Desgraciadamente esta mañana nos dijeron que todo estaba muerto. Lamentablemente ha ido mi hermano.
Estamos totalmente consternados, tristes, con el corazón partido por este desastre, por esta tragedia que ha afectado a todo el pueblo.
We move on, and US President Donald Trump repeated his threat to use military force if Iran did not agree to end its nuclear program. Trump said Iran could not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and if it declined to stop development efforts, military action could then follow. Iran, which had pushed against Trump's demands in recent weeks, said indirect talks would be held in Oman. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has also emphasised that a deal is possible only if the United States agree that there can be no military operation. Trump, who pulled the US out of a 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and world powers during his first term, earlier warned that Iran would be in great danger if talks were not successful. Meanwhile, Trump has also said that Israel would be the leader of a potential military strike against Iran if Tehran doesn't give up its nuclear weapons program. Let's hear what he said.
It's a start.
Do you have a timeline?
We have a little time, but we don't have much time
Who is starting the
because we're not going to let them have a nuclear weapon.
Is
Can't
it
let them
all
have a
going to
nuclear
be
weapon.
there, Mr. President?
And we're going to let them thrive. I want them to thrive. I want Iran to be great. The only thing they can't have is a nuclear weapon. They understand that. You know, the people are so incredible in Iran, and they're so smart. They're very smart people. But, you know, they're in a rough situation, rough with Iran. Yeah, if it requires military, we're going to have military. Israel will obviously be very much involved in that. He'll be the leader of that. But nobody leads us. We do what we want to do.
When did the clock run out on the talks?
That's because when the election was rigged, I figured they'd get...
Well, ahead of talks with Iran, the United States have issued fresh sanctions targeting the country. The US Treasury Department, in a statement, said it imposed sanctions on 5 Iran-based entities and 1 person based in Iran for their support of the country's nuclear program, with the aim of denying Tehran a nuclear weapon. The action comes after Trump made a surprise announcement on Monday that the United States and Iran were poised to begin direct talks on Tehran's nuclear program, but Iran's foreign minister said the discussions in Oman would be indirect. We now head to Europe, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of recruiting Chinese nationals and claimed that Moscow is attempting to drag China into the conflict. Zelensky revealed that Ukrainian authorities had identified over 150 Chinese citizens participating in direct combat. Let's hear what Zelensky said.
Ми маємо інформацію також і щодо інших громадян КНР у складі російської армії з іменами, прізвищами та описом конкретних шляхів потрапляння таких солдатів в російській окупаційній.
Zelensky's comments came shortly after Chinese authorities rejected his claims as absolutely groundless, reaffirming that Beijing has instructed its citizens to avoid involvement in armed conflicts. In addition, Zelensky announced Ukraine's readiness to purchase up to $50 billion worth of US military equipment, signalling stronger ties with the United States in light of the ongoing war. As tensions continue to rise, Zelensky's remarks highlight the growing international dimensions of the conflict. Moving to South Korea, and their opposition leader Lee Jae-myung has officially announced his bid for the presidency. Emerging as the frontrunner in opinion polls, his campaign focuses on tackling economic inequality and revitalising growth through major government investments in technology and talent. The election set for June the 3rd follows the impeachment of former President Yoon Suk-yeol, whose controversial martial law declaration in December was upheld by the courts last week. Lee says economic disparities have fueled social conflict and political instability, pledging pragmatic policies that prioritise effectiveness over ideology. While conservative critics warn that his leadership could strain relations with the United States and Japan, Lee insists that South Korea's national interests will remain the guiding principle in diplomacy, emphasising the importance of the US-South Korea alliance and regional cooperation. The 2611 mastermind Tahawur Rana is en route and has been extradited by the National Investigation Agency from the United States. A multi-agency Indian team has travelled to the US to bring him back on a special flight. His arrival is expected on Thursday afternoon. It has been 17 years since the 2611 terror attacks and 15 since Rana was arrested by the FBI on US soil. This development is being touted as the biggest extradition in recent times and a major diplomatic win for India. Reportedly, Tahawur Rana is the most likely to be lodged in Tahir jail upon his arrival to India. On arrival, Rana will be produced before a special NIA court in Patiala House. The NIA will seek his custodial interrogation, while officials hope that this will reveal new leads and possibly expose the involvement of Pakistani state actors in the 2611 terror attacks on Indian soil. Staying with India, and it has withdrawn a key trade facility for Bangladesh. India has announced that it will end transit access for Bangladeshi exports to third countries via Indian land routes. According to analysts, this move could disrupt Bangladesh's exports to Nepal, Bhutan and Myanmar. However, the Indian Foreign Ministry spokesperson denied any such claims. Let's listen in to the spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs of India.
Bangladesh on the transshipment. This was a facility that was extended to Bangladesh in 2020. The transshipment facility extended to Bangladesh had over a period of time resulted in significant congestion at our airports and ports. Logistical delays and higher costs were hindering our own exports and creating backlogs. The facility therefore has been withdrawn with effect from 8th April 2025. And let me clarify here, I saw some reports. These measures do not impact Bangladesh's exports to Nepal and Bhutan.
India's Customs Department have revoked a 2020 order that allowed counter-Asia shipments through land customs stations. Officials say delays are higher costs were affecting India's own exports. The decision comes as Bangladesh's interim leader Mohammad Yunus, during his recent visit to China, said Dhaka is the only guardian of the ocean for landlocked northeast India. India is one of Bangladesh's top trading partners. Economists warn that India's action may breach WTO rules that guarantee freedom of transit for landlocked countries. This move could also undermine the prospects for stronger ties between the two countries. Moving on, and Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan met with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the State Department, and the two called on the Sudanese army and paramilitary forces to resume peace talks. The diplomats agreed that the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces must protect civilians, open humanitarian corridors and return to civilian governance. The call came after the Sudanese army said last week it had retaken full control of the capital Khartoum after weeks of attacks by the paramilitary groups. The RSF has been battling the army since April 2023, and the war has created what the United Nations describes as the world's worst hunger and displacement crisis. Meanwhile, Trump said last month he may visit Saudi Arabia in a reprisal of 2017, when the oil-rich conservative kingdom was the first destination of his first term in office. Thousands of Argentinians took to the streets in a major anti-austerity protest, setting the stage for a 24-hour general strike. The strike, Argentina's third under President Javier Milei's 16-month tenure, comes as his government awaits news of a new loan agreement with the International Monetary Fund. The demonstration in Buenos Aires was peaceful, but underscored growing frustration with Milei's sweeping budget cuts. The president, known for his dramatic campaign stunt of wielding a live chainsaw to symbolise deep spending cuts, has aggressively followed through, eliminating subsidies, cutting government jobs and shutting down entire departments. According to analysts, while these measures have helped control inflation and secured Argentina's first budget surplus in over a decade, they've also pushed the country into recession and left millions struggling, though recent data suggests some improvement. Union leader Hector Dyer warned that the impact of austerity on vulnerable communities is far greater than inflation numbers suggest. The strike is expected to bring much of the country to a standstill, halting train and air travel while closing schools and banks. State-owned airline Air Alliance Argentinas, which Milei has pledged to privatise, cancelled 258 flights, disrupting travel for almost 20,000 passengers. However, bus services will continue to operate.
No tengo dudas que tanto Argentina como Paraguay serán un ejemplo para toda Sudamérica. Hacia adentro, dando la batalla eterna contra el Estado omnipresente y diversificado, y hacia afuera a través de la cooperación pacífica y el comercio. No hay fórmulas extravagantes, sino la convicción de que la libertad es el único camino posible. Por eso veo con esperanza un futuro de colaboración entre nuestras naciones.
Papua New Guinea is lifting a 3-year ban on forest carbon credit schemes, opening up its vast rainforests to global carbon offset projects. The country's climate minister announced the move on Thursday, citing new regulations and safeguards to manage the carbon market. With some of the world's most biodiverse rainforests, Papua New Guinea aims to become a key player in international carbon markets. However, the carbon credit market has been controversial, with concerns over mismanagement and exploitation by foreign companies. Despite this, the government is confident that the new regulations will ensure the protection of its forests and support global emission reduction efforts. That is all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest international news.